Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Sports Talk with Austin, late night edition. Pac-12 after dark, you may say. I am your host, Austin Williams, and today on the show we are going to be talking about the 2023 Pac-12 season. And there's a lot of things to discuss, but let's take care of some housekeeping first. Week 0 kicked off today. Speaking of the Pac-12, congratulations to USC and all my USC friends out there. Caleb Williams balling out per normal. USC's offense looking fantastic. Fantastic as normal. The defense for USC, little suspect still, but it's week 0. No time to panic just yet. Take it one game at a time. Congratulations to Vandy, Jacksonville State, and to Notre Dame on great victories today. Looking forward to what week 1 has to offer. I'm very excited for this upcoming college football season, but that's not why we're here today. We are here today to talk about the Pac-12 and all things Pac-12. So let's get started, shall we? By recapping last year. Last year, there was a lot of mystery. New quarterbacks, Michael Penix, Bo Nix, Caleb Williams. Cam Rising was the only quarterback from last year that is still here, while we have these 3 new ones from last year. Now, a lot of people, for USC especially, when they brought in Caleb Williams and all the offensive weapons and Lincoln Riley, some people were optimistic saying, USC could make the college football playoffs. They can win the Pac-12. And they almost did, but Utah stopped them in their tracks twice. No offense, Trojan fans, but they kind of had your number last year. Oregon, what an interesting year they had with Bo Nix and Dan Lanning in his first year. They got curb stomped on opening day against the eventual repeat national champions, and everyone thought the sky was falling. Oh my gosh, Oregon is going to go 7-5. They'll be lucky to make a bowl game. And then they had an incredible year, finishing 9-3, and then winning the Holiday Bowl. Bo Nix, a lot of people have a lot of hype for him this year. Can he contend for the Heisman? Is he one of the 10 best quarterbacks? I think that's self-explanatory. I think he is. And then you look down the pipeline, you've got Michael Penix and Caleb DeBoer for Washington, bringing Washington back to relevancy. Almost made the Pac-12 championship game, but due to the tiebreaker rules and everything else, they kind of got the short end of the stick. And I felt bad for you Washington fans because you had a fantastic season. And then you got not one of the better bowls. You should have gotten a New Year's Six, but just your wins and everything else that kind of didn't play in your favor. But hopefully it'll work better for you this year. And speaking of this year, we got a bunch of new faces this year. Deion Sanders, it's prime time in Boulder, Colorado. There's a lot of hype around him. Can he do a USC-like turnaround? Can he take Colorado from a complete dump heap to possible New Year's Six Pac-12 championship contender? We will have to see. I don't know. I don't want to call it too early, but he could, just based off because he's prime time. Now, another big question going into this year is, can Oregon State, can they take the next step? DJ Uyandale, who transferred over from Clemson, can Jonathan Smith get Oregon another 10-win season? Could they take the next step in the Pac-12? Can Cam Rising and company three-peat, complete the three-peat? Is Caleb Williams in USC? Is it their time? Can Caleb win yet another Heisman and then top it off with another championship? Those are all very interesting questions. Is Michael Penix, has he been figured out? There's many people believe, since there wasn't a lot of tape on him coming out of Indiana, since he had a lot of injury bugs to work out, that's why defenses weren't able to prepare for him. And maybe this year they prepare for him better. I don't know. Now, you look at Oregon. Can Oregon take the next step? They lost Kenny Dillingham to Arizona State, another new face in a new place. After Herm Edwards got fired, and now Kenny Dillingham's going to attempt to take over what seems to be an unwinnable situation at the moment with all these lawsuits and everything else coming his way. Stanford, Troy Taylor, is he the man to get him back on track? Can Stanford muster some wins together? Could they upset someone like a Notre Dame again, or maybe shock the world and beat a USC or maybe an Oregon? I don't know. It's all very interesting, and it's all very new in the Pac-12. And Jackson Johnson, thank you for being here. The new OC at Oregon was amazing at UTSA. Yes, and I believe now that he's getting his chance in a Power 5 program, he can really show what he's got. I think sky's the limit for him at Oregon. Now, with all that being said and all that taken into consideration, 2023 is just a short couple days away from being on their way for most Pac-12 teams, except for USC. Yours started earlier tonight, and you got a nice win against San Jose State. Congratulations. You took care of business. Now, on to my Pac-12 2023 standings. And let's start off with them boys at USC. I have them going 10-2 and 7-2 in the Pac-12, with losses to Utah and Oregon. Now, you look at their schedule, their first couple games, they got San Jose State, which they won, obviously. They got Nevada next weekend. And then they got Stanford, Arizona State, Colorado, Arizona. Those are all very winnable games, in my opinion. Then it gets a little tougher. Then you got Notre Dame coming into town after Arizona. You're going to Notre Dame, after Arizona. This is where the pick of Utah getting the dub in the Coliseum comes in at for me. It's not because I don't think USC can beat Utah. I think they can. But I just feel, coming off a hard-fought, wrenching win against Notre Dame, you're coming back home. I feel like Utah may catch you at the best time. And I feel like, just like they did with Oregon, may have your number. They just may have your number on speed dial. And I think their pressure is going to get to Caleb Williams. I think the defense of Utah is going to do to USC's offense what not many teams can do. And I think that causes a lot of trouble. Then they get Cal. And then after Cal, they get Washington. And I think they beat Washington. That's a big win for me. I think they're coming to the Washington is coming to the Coliseum. I feel like this is going to be a shootout. Whoever has the ball last is going to win this game. And I think Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams are going to have just enough scoring that they can win that game and kind of keep things hoping well in the Pac-12. And then the next week, you go up to Autzen, and then this is where it kind of gets gut-wrenching and taxing. Because, let's be honest, I think Oregon up in Autzen is going to be hard to beat. And I think they catch USC off a grind in, and I think Oregon takes advantage of it, and hence my 7-2 and 10-2 overall. Now, do I think possibly could they win against Utah or Oregon? Absolutely. If I had to pick one to say that y'all could win, would be the Utah game, just for the fact it is in Cali. They're coming to the Coliseum. And as I've been pointed out by my great friends Tim, Tony, and Rick, that when USC and Utah meet in the Coliseum, Utah does not have a above 500 record, and I think that's going to cause Utah to possibly lose that game. But I think the fact that you're coming off a grinding Notre Dame win on the road, and then the return home, Utah possibly fresher of the two, I think Utah can catch you. Jackson Johnson points out it's too bad that USC only has a bye week in week 3 and on rivalry week. Rivalry week. Now, I wouldn't say that, Jackson. They play. I wouldn't call UCLA a bye necessarily, but I get your point. Oh, excuse me. They do have a bye actually on rivalry. My bad, Trojan fans. My bad. They play UCLA the week before. Okay. I thought, Jackson, you were having a little humor there with me. No. So they do have a bye on rivalry. That's a little unnormal, but I guess confiscating for week 0. Now, with all that being said, Lincoln Riley, Caleb Williams, they're great. They're a very good duo together. Caleb Williams could possibly win another Heisman, but USC, their front half of their schedule favors them very well. But the back half is what I think is going to catch them. And if their defense can't get any better than what we saw tonight, which it's only week 0, I know we need to have patience. I'm all for patience, but if this continues, it could be a rough year. Now, speaking of rough years, Utah, what a grueling gauntlet of a schedule they got. I would like to know, the NCAA, what did Utah do to you? Their quest for a three-peat in the Pac-12 is going to be the hardest one that they've ever earned, because they start off against the Gators of Florida. Then they get Baylor. Then after they get their cupcake game, then they get UCLA. Then they get Oregon State, and then they finally get a bye. That's not an easy schedule to start out with. But looking at their schedule overall after the bye, everything else, I have Utah accumulated at 10-2 and 7-2, tied with USC. And with that win over USC, Utah would have the tiebreaker in the scenario for now. My two losses for Utah, I think they start off strong, but then when they go up to play at Oregon State, I think the Beavers catch them and the Beavers beat them. I have an upset after UCLA. I think Utah playing that first half of that grueling schedule up to UCLA. I think the Beavers, they're a very underrated team. Look for them to upset a lot of teams this year. I think Jonathan Smith, and company are going to beat Utah at home. Now, coming off the bye, off a tough loss, you get Cal. Then I have you beating SC, and then I have you beating Oregon off of an SC win. I think you're re-energized. I think they're thinking, oh, Oregon's got to come to our house now after we went up to Autzen. And they almost had that game last year if it hadn't been for the Cam Rising picks that he threw. But now they're coming up there. I think they get it done. Then Arizona State, I think they keep it rolling. I don't think they catch them napping, and then they go up to Washington, and I think Penix beats them. I think just like USC, that back half on the road, I think catches them. They already have that loss on the road at Oregon State. I just think that Utah is going to get caught against Washington. It's going to be a very close game. I think it could go either way, but due to the fact that it is such a grueling half of the schedule for Utah in general, just so many games that they could potentially lose. I've seen some predictions predict 8-4. I've seen some say go as worse as 6-6, but I think 10-2, 7-2 with losses to Oregon State and Washington both on the road. I could see the USC loss. I could see Oregon. I could also see them possibly dropping UCLA or drop the season opener. But I think Cam Rising, if he's healthy, Utah's got a lot of talent. They've added a lot of depth. Michael Pittman's Jr.'s younger brother, who went to USC, he's very talented given the chance. I think Utah overall, I think that Kyle Whittingham will get his guys together. I think they'll be able to muster 10 wins together. And I think they'll be able to get it done. Now, speaking of mustering wins together, on to Washington, who I have at 10-2 and 7-2 overall. Now, this is interesting. So I had them losing to USC, obviously. Obviously. Now, you wonder, where does that second loss come in? Well, I'm glad you asked. So I have Oregon State upsetting them as well. This is interesting because I think Oregon State, like I said, is going to upset a lot of teams this year. I think they go at Oregon State too, which doesn't make it any easier. And then the fact that you look at their schedule, it's pretty favorable up to USC. I mean, could Boise State shock them? Maybe, but like I've been told, Boise State ain't the Boise State of old. Then after that, they've got Michigan State, Cal, Arizona. Do we see wins them losing those games? Not really. Michigan State, some people think that Mel Tucker and company could beat Washington this year. I don't see it. I think Penix and company will have enough there. Then you look after that, off the bye, they get Oregon. I think with 2 weeks to prepare at home against Oregon, I think they get it done. I think they go up and they beat the Ducks. 2 weeks to prepare. I think Washington's got that covered. And then Arizona State, Stanford, easy wins. Stanford could be a little bit of a trap game because they're looking for maybe to SC, but I don't think so. I don't think we're going to see a possible Michigan-Ohio State scenario where they're looking ahead. I think Washington takes care of business. Then the SC game, I think, like I said for USC, it's going to be a very high-scoring, high-paced game. Could be in the high 40s, maybe even hit the 50s possibly, depending on how much the defenses want to show up that day. And then after that, I got them beating Utah at home. I think off of a loss on the road, I think they come home and they beat the Utes, get a bounce-back win. And then Oregon State says, oh, you think you're riding high now? You're coming to our place. We're going to pack it, and we're going to upset you, Penix, and we're going to ruin your college football playoff hopes. And the Pac-12 does what the Pac-12 does. I mean, it's just what the Pac-12 does. Just when someone gets momentum, it goes away just like that with a blink of an eye. And then last week against the Wazoo Cougars, I think they'll take care of that because they're going to be mad that we blew it, that we should have won this game, that it should have been ours. We should be possibly clinching bids for playoffs. Instead, we're just hoping to win the Pac-12 now. And with all that being said, there's, unlike Utah, their schedule is very favorable. Is there more games they can lose? Like I said, Michigan State for sure. Boise, sure. Could they lose to Arizona State, Stanford? No. I don't see no trip up there. Now maybe if Arizona State was away, maybe just for the fact that Arizona State could tend to play spoiler at home because they did it to Oregon in 2019. Because Oregon couldn't have been playoffs that year if they just would have won out, more than likely. They could have gotten in over Oklahoma, but it just didn't happen. But yeah, just looking at it, I think Washington, I think they're pretty much set. USC and Oregon State, the only two teams I could see beating them, and that's because they're both on the road. I think Washington's going to be really solid this year. Penix, is he the best quarterback ahead of Caleb Williams? As of right now, you would have to say who has the Heisman, Caleb Williams. Until someone takes it from him, the conversation shouldn't be open. But that conversation will always be open because we are in the world of college football. Now, speaking of conversations, this is going to be a real conversation starter right here, people. I got the Ducks going 9-3 and 6-3. I know, I'm a crazy man. I know, but hear me out on this. So the Ducks, first couple weeks, well, actually, up until Stanford, the only game that I think the Ducks really might struggle with is Texas Tech, and that's because it's in Lubbock, in Texas Tech land. Other than that, I don't see any possible games that they could lose. I mean, could Dion and company maybe spoil Oregon and say, "Oh, we're going to add a fourth loss"? I love primetime, but like my good buddies at the Pac-12 show said, maybe the drinking too much primate is gonna cause me to irrationally think. So for right now, I'm gonna say that they don't win that game. That Colorado doesn't win that game, which we'll get to them. But for Oregon, looking at them all the way up, Stanford, and then they got their bye, and then they get Washington. Now both teams, Washington and Oregon, both have byes. I would like to mention that both teams have 2 weeks to prepare, but I feel like Washington will prepare just a little bit better, and I feel like Washington's defense may just be a hair better than Oregon's. And I think Michael Penix will outplay Bo Nix that game, and the run game, and I think Caleb DeBoer is going to call a great game, maybe even a phenomenal game, and I think they beat the Ducks. I don't think it's any more than a field goal, maybe a touchdown. I don't see it being a runaway game. I don't see it being one of those, where Washington beats them 41-10 like Georgia did. I see something like along the lines of 37-30, 28-25, something that's super close right there. And then after that, they get Washington State at home, bounce back game. I think Bo Nix company gets it done. Then they get Utah. They're going up to Rice Eccles. If that's a night game, that could be treacherous. And I think Cam Rising, if he's healthy, Kyle Whittingham, they got revenge on their mind this year for a couple teams. And I think Oregon's on that hit list. And I think they're coming to take the Ducks out. And now this is where things get a little kooky. So after the USC win, they got a big win at USC in Austin. They're like, Pac-12 championship is still in our grasp. Even a New Year's Six is still there. And then they go at Arizona State. Call me crazy, but I've got Arizona State beating Oregon. Yeah, I think the Ducks, after such a big win, I think the Ducks get upsetted. And I think Oregon State takes the dub. And Kenny Dillingham knows him really, really well. And I think the Ducks, after such a big win, get their season spoiled. They play spoiler alert to their season. Now, then the last game of the season, Oregon State. I don't see Oregon State upsetting Oregon again this year. I think with upsets over Utah and Washington already, I think then Oregon comes in and it's like Oregon's at home. I think that's where it kind of ends. And looking at Oregon's schedule, it works out well for them. They got their 4 big games. I think they win all 4, but they had that slip up at Arizona State. So, yeah, I know Oregon fans are probably going to think I'm a little on the nuts side, but Arizona State is just a house of horrors for the Ducks. When it comes to their dreams and hopes of winning anything big. Now, on to Oregon State. State, I have them going 9-3 and 6-3. Oregon State, like I said, they're a team that I think will play spoiler to a lot of teams in the Pac-12. I think that they are going to. I think they are going to win a lot of big games, but where Oregon State tends to fall short at is I think they will lose to the Wazoo Cougars. I think after they start off a good 3-0, I think Wazoo shocks them. I think the Cougars get them. And then they get the big win against Utah. And then it's like, that's where the magic comes in at. You go, Oregon State, DJ, he's always due for that one bad game. I think Wazoo is that one bad game. And then he comes up. Then they go and beat Utah. And then then after that, it's kind of like they get Cal, then they get UCLA, then they get a bye, Arizona. Things are looking good, right? And then primetime comes in and gets them. I think the Buffs shock the Beavs this year. I think primetime wants to play a little spoiler himself, prove that he is actually that he can take a Power 5 school and get them to a bowl perhaps. And then after that, Stanford, and then they get the big win over Washington, and then they lose to Oregon. So it's all very interesting for Oregon State. Could they go 9-3 or less? I think they could lose to Utah, like I said. UCLA could be a loss. Arizona could be a loss. Could Washington be a loss? Sure. But for right now, I think it's very interesting, to say the least, for Oregon State. Can Jonathan Smith and company take that next step? I think they do. The big question is DJ going to be able to play to the standard that they hope he can? The Heisman candidate that Clemson picked, can he bring some of that magic over here to Oregon State? We will have to see for sure. Very much for sure. Now, speaking of interesting coaches and talents, UCLA, the Bruins, Chip Kelly and Dante Moore, who replaced DTR, and then the new backfield replacing Zach Charbonnet, and company. I think UCLA take a step back this year after going 9-4 last year, including their bowl loss. I think they go 8-4 and 6-3 in the Pac-12. 12 this year. I think they lose at San Diego State. I think the Aztecs get the victory against UCLA. I think that's going to be a loss. And then you go down their list and say, well, then after that, they get an easy cupcake game. Then, of course, Utah. I think Utah can handle UCLA, especially since the fact UCLA beat them last year. I think Cam Rising, Kyle Whittingham says, no, that's not going to happen again. We're going to take care of business. Then they get a bye. Then I think they beat Wazoo. Oregon State, I think, gets them. I think the Beavs are going to play spoiler for them. And don't worry, UCLA fans, you're going to beat Stanford, you're going to beat Colorado, you're going to beat Arizona, you're going to beat Arizona State. Then you got to lose to SC. I think Caleb Williams, he is a better quarterback as we speak right now to Dante Moore. And if we're just going off quarterback play and overall coaching and defense, I think that falls in USC's favor. And then you get to beat up on Cal as your reward. So it's not all bad. It's UCLA, you get some reprieve somewhere. You get 8 wins, you make a nice bowl. But and schedule is a little tough because you could lose the opening game to Coastal Carolina. Let's be honest. You could lose that game for sure. You could lose to what? You could lose to to Cal possibly, if and only if things happen. I know I said they get to beat up on Cal, but we've seen in past where Chip Kelly has sometimes just fallen apart. I think they should be able to handle Cal, but that could happen. They could lose to Arizona again. Colorado could catch them napping. But I think UCLA's got too much talent. I think they get it done. I think UCLA overall goes 8-4, 6-3, and I think Chip Kelly, at least for another year, can maybe keep his seat unwarm. Because there has been those talks. Is he on the hot seat? Is he, possibly? Is this the end of Chip Kelly? I don't know. But you know what it is? It is the end of UCLA for now. Now, on to the Wazoo Cougars. Washington State. I have them going 7-5 and 4-4. You look at Washington State. They open up with a nice little win, and then they get Wisconsin. Luke Fickell is coming into town. Last year Wisconsin lost that game. Is there magic again? I think Washington gets them back this time. I think Luke Fickell is going to apply a better defense, a better offense, and I think Washington State's going to lose this game, and I feel like Wisconsin, they're a borderline New Year's Six contender, maybe a bowl team if they can get things fixed and going right. I think Wazoo loses this game. And then you go down, and then they get a big win against Oregon State. A big win at home. They get a pick-me-up win. Oh, we didn't beat Wisconsin, but we beat Oregon State. And then off the bye, then you lose to UCLA. And then you beat Arizona. Then Oregon catches you and beats you up. Then you lose to Colorado and Washington the last two games of the year, making you a 4-4 total, 7-5. I think Cam Ward, he's a guy like Cam Rising who doesn't get a lot of respect, but he's a really good quarterback. I think he's going to be one that is overlooked on draft day. I think he's a late round bloomer. I think put him in the right situation, he could be really good. He's shown what he could do here at Washington State when he has an O-line and has somewhat of an offense. I think he's good enough to get this team 7 wins, maybe even 8. Maybe they beat UCLA somehow, or maybe they beat Colorado. I just think Colorado, I think they're going to beat Wazoo this time around. I think it's just very interesting with Wazoo. You just never know. Can they get it done? We'll have to see. Now, speaking of Colorado, it's prime time. Something, something, something. It's prime time. And no shock here. I've got Colorado making a bowl game. I know. And going 3-6 in the Pac-12. I know I might be a little crazy, but I'm buying the prime time. I'm drinking the Primeade, as my good buddy Tim Prankley likes to point out. I'm drinking the Primeade. I'm drinking away. So, here's where the craziness starts. I have them starting the season off 3-0. I have them beating TCU. Then I have them beating Nebraska. And then I have them beating Colorado State. And Primetime's putting people on notice. Now, are they going to beat Oregon? Are they going to beat Oregon and USC? No, not yet. I don't. Not yet. Just not yet. They'll get there eventually. If they ever play again after this year, they'll get to that level. But then I got them beating Arizona State. I think they can beat the Sun Devils. Then I think Stanford catches them. Stanford catches them at home. I think just because it's a new learning experience, they're going to beat all these good teams to start, and then Stanford's going to kind of catch them. Then with 2 weeks to prepare off of a bye, they get UCLA. I think the Bruins, Dante Moore, Chip Kelly, I think get it done, especially up in Boulder. I think they can go up to Boulder and win that game. And then Oregon State. Then I got Oregon State getting upsetted. Oregon State gets upsetted after all these big upsets. They're on the receiving end now. Colorado at home beats them, and then they lose to Arizona, and then there goes the momentum again. It's going to be a roller coaster season. You're going to start hot, and then you're going to lose some confusing games. Then Washington State, I think you win that game, and then Utah, I think, still beats you, putting them at 6-6. I know some people want to say they'll be lucky to win 2 games still. I think, for me personally, I think they're a bowl team at least. I don't think they're as bad as people think. I think Primetime, with all the 5-star flips he's gotten, transfers, I think he's going to bring his coaching philosophy over. I think he's going to change the culture. I think he's going to make Colorado great again. And it starts this year. Now, speaking of changing culture and making great, let's talk about Jed Fish and those Arizona Wildcats, who we now know can play some football. Everyone used to think they could just play basketball. Oh my goodness, they can play football? Yes, guys, they can play football. Nothing new. And I think Arizona makes a bowl game this year finally. We all remember last year they beat UCLA the week before. They went up before UCLA went up to USC. Before USC came to them, pardon me. And everyone was surprised by that. But Arizona, they're a very sneaky team in the Pac-12. I think there's a lot of potential there. I really do. If they could get things right, Jed Fish keep this going the right direction, I think they can get this done. I think, obviously, our first game, I think they're going to win that. Mississippi State, RIP Coach Leach, I think they're learning a new offense. Of course, Will Rogers is going to help steer the ship easier. But I think Mississippi State, Arizona, it was 50-50, but I went Arizona slightly. I wouldn't be surprised if it went the other way. But I think, for now, I think Arizona is going to get that dub. Then they beat Stanford. Then the string of games really begin. Then you get Washington, SC, Washington State. That's 3 straight losses. Then they get a bye, and then they get Oregon State, UCLA. The losing, it's getting bad. And then you beat Colorado. And then Utah off of a big win in your book. And then you lose to Utah. And then you go up and you beat Arizona State to ensure that you will make a bowl and everything will be all right and the ceiling is not falling in Arizona State. Now, speaking of ceiling possibly falling, is the ceiling falling at Cal? Is Coach Wilcox, is it falling? Well, according to me, it is. I have Cal going 4-8, 2-7 in the Pac-12. I think they win opening day. Then they get an SEC team at home against Auburn. I think Hugh Freeze and company, I think Auburn takes them to the woodshed. I think hide your kids that night or day. Don't let them see this game because California is going to get ran off the field. And then they get Washington 2 weeks later. That's a loss. I think they could beat Arizona State. Then they get Oregon State, Utah. Those are losses. Then they get a bye 2 weeks to prepare for SC. Oregon, Washington State, 3 consecutive weeks. I think those are losses. And then I think they go up and beat Stanford, and then UCLA gets them. UCLA beats them per normal. Could UCLA slip up like they did to Arizona? Sure. Could Cal be that team for them? Sure. But I think Dante Moore, Chip Kelly, they should be able to beat Cal. I don't foresee Oregon, USC, Utah, Washington. I don't foresee any of those games Cal winning. I know, as all of my good Trojan friends say, the Cal game was just freaky because Cal almost won that game, but they called off all the dogs. It's very interesting. Could that happen again where maybe Oregon, maybe SC, Utah, maybe call off the dogs, and then they somehow keep it closer? Maybe, but it still ain't going to translate to wins. I got them winning 2 total Pac-12 games. I don't think Cal's going to do very good, especially after losing Jack Plummer to my guys at Louisville. I just think this is going to be a rough year for Cal. Now, speaking of rough, when you talk about rough, so to speak, Stanford, Troy Taylor, you've got some work to do, my friend. You're taking over David Shaw's job. Can Troy Taylor get the recruiting going? Can he make Stanford relevant again? I won't even say make them what they were with Christian McCaffrey and Bryce Love in 2015, 16, and 17. I'm just going to say, can you make them relevant again to where they're making bowls and maybe even winning 8 games? Well, not this year. It's going to be a rough year. I got you going 3-9 and 1-7. I think for me personally, I think Stanford, looking at their schedule, I think they'll beat Hawaii. Then I think the next week when they play SC, that's obviously a loss. The tree isn't going to have a fun night that night. Caleb Williams is just going to torch that defense. Then I think Arizona, Oregon, those are losses. Then off of a bye, 2 weeks to prepare, I think they beat Colorado at home. I think the tree pulls off an upset. That's their only Pac-12 win. And then after that, they just go on a streak of just losing. UCLA, Washington State, Oregon State, Cal. And then for my good friend Will and D, I think the Irish get them back. They go up to the tree and beat the tree. Notre Dame won't have that on their record anymore. And Troy Taylor, you got some work to do. I hope you can get it fixed so we can see Stanford competing for conference titles again, but you got a long road ahead of you, and I think this is not the year, and it's just going to be a rough year. Now, speaking of rough and new coaches, Arizona State, I have them going 2-10 and 1-8. And Kenny Dillingham, who's the OC at Oregon, now coming over here to Arizona State with former quarterback back Drew Pine of Notre Dame. He's the new starter. Arizona State, I'm sorry, but they've got a long season ahead. I think it's just going to be rough for them. I have them winning 1 game, 2 games total. I have them winning their second game of the season. Their first game of the season against, I can't even pronounce it because it's that crazy, Newey, Louisiana. And then after that, they go on a string of losing. They lose to Oklahoma State. They lose to SC, Cal, Colorado. And then they lose to Washington. And then they lose to State, Utah, UCLA. When is this all going to stop? Aha! Kenny Dillingham gets Oregon to come visit his town. And they strike an upset. After Oregon is riding this high, they're possibly competing for the Pac-12 title, a big New Year's Six clincher possibly, and then Oregon's dreams go bye-bye once again, courtesy of the desert of Arizona State. And then off such a big win, then they lose their rival Arizona. And it is not a pretty sight. It is not a pretty sight, to say the least. There's going to be some fixing to be done for the Cal, Stanfords, and Arizona States of the world. I think it's going to take them some time. I think it's going to take them some time to get fixed, get recruiting together if they want to compete with the SCs, Oregon States, Utahs, Washingtons of the world. Which after this year, the Pac-12 has disintegrated as we know it. But as for this year, it's going to be bad. I think overall it's going to be something that Arizona State fans, close your eyes. Yeah, you'll get to enjoy beating Oregon, but then That's going to be your only bright spot for now. Now, what everyone wants to know, what is my Pac-12 championship game prediction? Well, I'll tell you. Utah over Washington. I think now I spent hours calculating all tiebreaker rules and I did a little math. And this is the best scenario I came up. In this scenario, Utah makes it over USC and Washington makes it over USC. And I think Cam Rising and company complete the three-peat. I think they get their revenge against Washington. And sorry to all USC fans, great fans out there, but you got the Washington treatment of last year. You got screwed in my scenario. If this is how it goes down, you get screwed. And then Utah and Washington end up playing for the Pac-12 title game. And I think Utah gets the revenge, gets it done. And I think Utah rides off into the Big 12 happy and ready to make some noise there. I hope y'all enjoyed this. This is my 2023 Pac-12 predictions. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment down below. Leave me any feedback. Tell me if I'm crazy on these predictions or if I'm spot on. And don't forget, Monday night at 11:15, I'm going live with Jeffrey from Only Talk Sports to preview the 2023 Indiana football season. I hope y'all enjoy this great content I'm putting out to you. We're definitely going to be doing more of this now that college football is back. Thank you all so much for being here. And I'm out this thing. Peace.